Hello, and welcome to another episode of Ask a Pianist. My name is Andrew Aarons, and today we'll be looking at a voicing issue which tends to be forgotten by pianists, not necessarily on purpose, but because other matters frequently take precedence. Voicing, on the most general level, allows us to separate and highlight a melody away from an accompaniment, creating a hierarchy of sound which informs the listener what to listen to. What we tend to forget is that the accompaniment itself requires voicing as well, and the choices which determine what kind of voicing approach can be successful are dependent upon the harmony, the aesthetic, and of course the texture and register of the instrument. In this episode, we'll be looking at simple accompaniments and their voicing possibilities. The question today on Ask a Pianist is, how do I voice my left hand? The slow movement of Bach's Italian Concerto is a marvelous combination of a complex melody in the right hand, suspended over a rather simple and repetitive accompaniment in the left. On the general voicing level, the left and right hands are so radically different in terms of register and character that there is very little need for a conscious voicing decision to be made for the sake of creating a hierarchy of melody over accompaniment. Therefore, most pianists who are studying this piece for the first time spend a lot of effort and energy learning to control and execute the right-hand notes in ways that sound, essentially, beautiful. Given the musical material, I can easily understand why. But having a melody that is gorgeous is only half the battle. The accompaniment must be considered in as much detail as the melody, especially because it is built of 3 different voices rather than just one. I'll show you what I mean. Let's look at the opening, which starts off with the accompaniment on its own. This pattern of one upper chord plus two lower notes plus three upper chords is repeated in the entire piece, save for 4 bars. In the same way that the melody is automatically voiced away from the accompaniment due to the register, the accompaniment itself is also automatically voiced to an extent. We have two very separate musical ideas. One of them is a series of chords moving stepwise. And another is a fundamental note being repeated in the bass. For example, we can imagine this piece without melody entirely, and there is enough musical material in the accompaniment alone to create the impression of a secondary melody with an accompaniment. Because the secondary melody is constructed of 2-note chords, we must make a decision how we treat the notes that make up the chord. In other words, a hierarchy must be applied to these in order to take full advantage of the harmonic capabilities that these chords have. Do we voice towards the top all the time? Do we voice towards the bottom all the time? Do we voice sometimes to the top, sometimes to the bottom, depending on the circumstance? How do we decide? Due to Bach's writing style, the accompaniment here represents a kind of filling in of harmonies. Each chord creates a framework upon which the melody is hung. If one were to find a case where a chord seemed empty or devoid of a specific harmonic element, like a third or a seventh, we'd most likely find it in the right hand. Because of this, one can make a generalized voicing decision, which applies to all the left-hand material, and it could be quite successful. As an example, we could say that we'd voice to the top note of the chord every time. This can even extend to the areas that are not constructed of thirds. Similarly, we could say, let's voice to the bottom notes every time. While I don't believe it to be as successful, I think it is still possible if done carefully. Either way, having some kind of voicing hierarchy is going to be far more interesting to a listener than having none. Compare this. With this. It's a subtle change, but one that can mean the difference between a good performance and a truly evocative one. Though a generalized voicing approach can be effective, I think it's very important for a pianist to consider the context of the left-hand chords, specifically in terms of structure and harmonic function. There are areas where the voicing can be reversed, and areas where perhaps individual notes can even be brought out. This is where voicing becomes something of an art, rather than just a mathematical problem. Let's have a look at a few specific cases in this piece. In the opening bars with the melody, the left-hand pattern consists of thirds. These change in the fourth bar to sixths. These sixths would not be important, but for two reasons. One is that this fourth bar serves harmonically as a reinforcement of the main tonic key. Secondly, instead of just inverting the thirds into sixths, creating this situation, Bach has the sixth resolve into a full octave at the end instead of staying as a sixth. These two reasons all point to a structural point of interest, and in my view, this can be easily highlighted by simply voicing to the lower voice when the sixths come in. This can give the impression to the listener of a more firm or solid resolution. Let's try it with the melody. First, with the voicing still towards the top of the left hand. Now, with the voicing towards the bottom. See what I mean? Voicing can also be changed on the individual note level, and I find that this occurs most often because of specific notes which harmonically provide interest or harmonic tension. In bar 9, we have a held A in the right hand, suspended over the usual thirds, but the left hand provides significant harmonic tension by passing through a B flat. A and B flat tend to clash quite heavily on the piano, and though it's brief, it's an opportunity to showcase this dissonance, especially because in the following bar, Bach ups the ante by introducing a B natural into the melody against the B flat in the accompaniment. What this all means is that we can signal to the audience that something unusual is happening by emphasizing these dissonances, which are largely singular events. Instead of simply playing through it with the usual voicing to the top, like this, I now emphasize the B flat specifically in order to create more of a harmonic tension, like this. I think it's far more effective. So far, we've looked at having a stable voicing approach that applies to all cases, as well as having a change in voicing for a set of chords or even a singular note. But what do we do when Bach gives us two voices in the accompaniment that move in contrary motion? How do we voice this? It's difficult, but not impossible, and it can provide a beautiful little transition if executed with precision. Bar 27 links the first half of the piece with the second, and instead of parallel thirds or sixths, we have the two voices separating out in contrary motion. On the one hand, we could approach this the same way as before, by voicing either to the top like this, or to the bottom like this. I don't think, however, that this is necessarily the best way to go about it. What would happen if we played the two voices with two hands, ignoring the distribution in favor of melodic or harmonic beauty? Well, we'd find that one voice rises to the tonic, and the other falls to the tonic. The natural instinct would be to have the upper voice crescendo slightly and the lower voice decrescendo slightly. So why don't we try to do that within one hand? The result is one which doesn't follow the previous voicing approaches, because essentially our ears hear a crossover of importance. In order for the lower voice to decrescendo, it actually has to start louder than the dynamic in context. The upper voice, in order to crescendo, must start softer than the dynamic in context. What this amounts to is the lower voice starting louder than the upper voice, and the upper voice gradually getting louder as the lower voice diminishes. This creates the crossover effect, where voicing is transferred from the lower voice to the upper. The voicing possibilities I've talked about in this episode are merely a glimpse into what can be done when two or three voices are being dealt with in an accompaniment. As well, voicing decisions change depending upon the composer and genre of music, and can even be influenced by what instrument you are playing on or what kind of acoustic setting you are playing in. For those who are just beginning to discover the wonderful possibilities available to us through voicing, my advice would be to pay attention to your accompaniments, especially when they seem simple. In many cases, the simplicity is deceiving. Well, that's it for this episode of Ask a Pianist. Keep on practicing, and don't neglect your left hand accompaniments. Bye for now.